Um, Hello, guys. Welcome back to another episode of Mind Stigma with myself, Tom Perry.
Yeah, and myself, Alex Emery. Today, our guest is Steve Wilson, friend, fellow veteran, sort of. Fellow veteran. Lived and still comes back to Mountbatten Pavilion to aid in some of the work that we do with veterans, and just wanted to come on to sort of share his story around his mental health, and obviously his escapades ever since. So yeah, welcome, Steve.
It's nice to be here. Thank you for having us. I like the work. I just want to quickly say that I like the work that you lot have done. I've listened to on Spotify and whatnot, and I feel like it's a good thing you lot have started, and I hope you continue it. And suppose I'll start with a bit about me.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, just tell us a bit about yourself, mate.
As I was just sort of saying before we started recording, like most people that join the military, come from a relatively broken home. Things, never really great. Joined up because for a calling as such, for something greater than oneself, which is a theme I'll probably repeat through this, to be fair. Went through all the sort of escapades that you normally do when you enlist. Became a searcher in the Royal Engineers, which is quite a sort of dangerous but nonetheless respectable profession, especially with the height of Afghan and Iraq, and the ID threats that come from it.
What dates are we talking that you joined then? An age.
I joined when I was 18, so like an adult enlistment as such. Although let's be honest, no man's really close to being an adult at that age.
Just a stupid child.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know I'm there yet, but yeah. So I joined when I was 18 in 2005, uh, and then I've done about 9 years, and in that time I've done only one tour, but nonetheless quite a hard one I consider, and that was Afghanistan.
What year was that?
That would have been 2010, which would have been Herrick 11 and 12, I think, because we where we went in there was the rip in and rip out. So we covered sort of the middle ground of two. Yeah, I mean, I had pretty much a sort of a grey career as such. Never really shined or excelled, but never really was like truly bad at anything. I just plodded along. Enjoyed it for what I was, as most young men, drunk too much, behaved too like badly, but like I was with a giant family, which is something that definitely everyone misses when you get out. Which is something we'll probably come on to later on. But I'd probably say like the 2 or 3 year point, after training and I finally got into the regiment and everything else, I noticed something within myself, like issues as such, in regards mainly towards anger. But I think I was angry because I didn't really know what was why I was feeling so different, or what was going on. I wouldn't say I had like a really bad upbringing, but it most certainly could have been better. And there were certain instances that definitely developed later on to turn me into the person I was, for the good and for the bad.
What did you first like? So obviously you joined
Joined '05.
'05. You get through your training elements and that, and I think and so this whole period of learning, finding yourself within like a new organization, a cog, becoming part of that, and finding functionality in that. Like where did that first initial feeling of that anger or the feelings that arose around that? Why and where did that come from? Do you feel like?
I feel like it was always there. I was a relatively angry child. Um, just in a household with two brothers and a single mum, in a typical sort of council estate environment.
Mhm.
There was always an element of anger there, both like at home and on the streets, in life. But then as I sort of become it into adulthood and then in the military setting, was sort of when I started to recognize it for inherently not being a sort of societal norm,
Yeah.
and it being an issue. But again, I think, in hindsight now, this is because there was a lot of feelings and emotions and things that had happened to me, and I didn't really know how to explain it or deal with it appropriately.
Do you think like because I can kind of like sort of say like yeah that is I feel like maybe it's a kind of I don't want to say it's a normal thing.
It's almost cliche though, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because I honestly believe that this is why a lot of people go into the military. It's that they're slowly steered towards it by having not necessarily broken homes, but they're missing that sort of,
It's that family link, I think, isn't it?
yeah, the enjoyment of being
Yeah, being
just
around
being.
others, yeah, and actually helping others and being part of something bigger than yourself. And I've said it before, it's kind of one of the biggest, one of the biggest sell points, I think. And unfortunately, that is what it is.
I mean, that's all wrapped up in the nationalistic pride and the honour and everything else. But like when you break all the PR, can we swear here?
Yeah.
Yeah, when you break all that bollocks and all that sort of, oh, I'm doing this for at the time Queen and country and all that. It's not. It's because you want to be a
Your
part
purpose,
of
isn't it?
something. Yeah,
Your
yeah,
purpose.
yeah.
And I think that's what most lads, and personally, what I see that comes through the door, be as all different age groups, is that uh, their purpose is now changing again. And that's initially what started them off in the military, is the purpose thing. Like, okay, well, you know what, I did have a family. Yeah, there was love there, but actually, you know what, I didn't get a sense of respect, or I didn't feel like I got pushed or driven. It was very bare bones love and basic family stuff. Which, don't get me wrong, you was from a normal household. In the sense that a lot of single mothers kicking about, and you've got kids that are two or three people that are trying to get all that attention out of one person. It does create, I think, a little bit of animosity there for life, for love, for family, and I think that's what people will then strive for in the
So
military.
it's
Is
almost like a feeling of injustice that you're trying to right later
yeah,
on. I mean, I think we should go into that again, but I kind of want to, like I was saying before, like that's how I was feeling about things, and I started to notice it and pick it up as I was slowly a long way from maturing completely, obviously, but like starting to mature and becoming aware of oneself, because I was now in an organization that was definitely like bigger than me, and a part of a team that was bigger than me, and a part of like a family that was bigger than me. Because when you reflect on how society was, and especially how it is now, it's very selfish and singularly orientated, which is why a lot of people are desperate now, because they're missing that sort of connection. Um, but so through all that, that's when I started to realise that there were sort of fundamental issues. But I channeled it the wrong way, and usually the stereotypical thing is, right, well, I just need to be more manly.
yeah,
So drinking heavily, then doing fizz the next day, the same old cliche things that 99.9% of the ex forces in this building and around the country will probably agree with is, you can just run it out or fight it out or drink it out, and it obviously didn't work. But then that was sort of kept on a low burner as such. I still managed to go about my day like everyone else and do my job. And then the years would pass, and then obviously Afghan sort of come into it was our rotation time. And yeah, so there was the build up to that. During uh, that sort of pre build up, I'd met a woman and we got quite close, and I met her at a friend's wedding, and it as we had that sort of pressure behind us of me going away to war. Um, that was just constantly running in the background with the whole relationship.
what was that feeling like then? Because for me, I hadn't encountered that yet at all, and and there's plenty of guys in there that tried to describe to me, but they couldn't, because I think it's an out of body experience going into, especially when you get to that war zone, but the preparation. Because for some people, it was knowing, especially when you then went away, it's knowing full well that there has been a lot of deaths, the threats that are out there, what you're going there with equipment wise, and I feel like sometimes you're set up to fail, but I feel like you knew that there was holes in your armor, for want of better words, and you knew that there was no amount of training now that could potentially undo some of those.
I think in regards to that, like at the time, obviously it felt like a massive step that I was taking. In reflection to everything that's happened in recent life, I honestly believe that my hand was being held. But that's only because obviously of my going to Ukraine.
Yeah.
So it's like your worst day is always going to be your worst day. Um, until you have another one that's worse. You know what I mean? So like, regardless of how minute that day or that time, that period might seem in hindsight, at the time, like I just said, it was your worst day. So you had it like, so the build up to Afghanistan was scary, as it would be for everyone there. And it's like almost a cliche to say this now, but anyone that says they ain't scared is either a liar or delusional.
Yeah.
And like, I've carried that with me. People would say that or consider me brave or like stupid or whatever, wherever you want to play it. And it's just like, man, I was fucking scared just like everyone else.
So I was about to say, I mean, being in that environment, I can imagine is a constant worry, just a constant thought of what's going to happen next.
It's that anxiety in it. I think it's like the your foot's on the pedal continually. The cogs aren't stopping for you. You know, night or day, war's war, or even the build up is it is basically war within yourself. You know, you're having an internal fight with your emotions and because it is such an unnatural thing to put yourself in danger. You know what I mean?
The conflict you have with yourself, I believe, is the fact that you're so out of control of what's happening around you. The only thing you can control is the fight with yourself. Because, quite frankly, in regards to Afghanistan, you are literally, in essence, just like, all right, you get your Bakshi 6 months pre-deployment training. It's pretty much out of date by the time you get there. Can't be helped. It's just the way the nature of the beast. Then they pick you up and then they chuck you into this random country with a culture that they've only showed you slideshows of about how they do things, how they conduct themselves, how they, how they speak and everything. You've got like a little bit of paper with some phrases on, just like, I don't know even if that means stop or go or turn, and then you're guessing from there. Point, you can only rely on those around you and hope that your training has been adequate, which you can only train so much ultimately, because when shit hits the fan, that's it. Everything's fucking fucked anyway.
For our listeners and that, and for people that are watching that, how would you describe that when you came out and you went back into the workplace? Is there anything that's ever been similar, like the build up wise, maybe whether it be anxiety around being in the workplace, learning something new? Has anything ever matched that at all?
The elephant in the room, we'll talk about Ukraine, but but before that, as a civilian side of things,
Have you chased that? Have you chased that feeling?
try to. I mean, I've done forestry for a few years, and I was quite fortunate in the fact that when I transitioned from military to civilian, forestry was quite a big chunk of that initial transition. And I broke everything down into military terms. So I had all my PPE, and then that was all done like as my military PPE would be. And then I had my chainsaw, which then I treated as my weapon as such. And then the dangers and like the risks at that sort of line of work, especially when you have absolutely the only thing I'd ever done before was climb a tree. So like this charity that was set up in Kent was like teaching everyone sort of from the basics up, and that was very fortunate for me because that like I had what would I consider a relatively smooth transition in relation to some other people, and that sort of helped break me in because I was in that sort of lifestyle that wasn't the society's norm, you know.
That is a massive help, isn't it? Because when you
Yeah.
think about what the expectation of you whilst you're in the military versus when you leave, and the expectation of any other organisation is nowhere near as high. So I then think this is when we start rolling into when you start self-analyzing yourself and where you're at in life, and like everyone does. And I think obviously the military it's a bit of a curse for that, because it does build you up to believe you are
Gives
something
you
bigger.
purpose.
Yeah, it gives you a massive purpose. And if you roll back to the beginning of it all and talking about families and that sort of stuff, and then all of a sudden you've lost your family, which is the military, your job because you've decided it's not quite you anymore, and then all of a sudden now you're trying to build a family, get a job, and then rebuild a whole life. And the expectation is massive. And I think if you're not mentally cut out for that, I mean, this is the fallout here.
I don't think you could truly be cut out for it. I believe you can prepare yourself to be more resilient to the change. But we're only human. We're all infallible. Like you can never make yourself indestructible. And it's like that fallacy where everyone just assumes that if I do this and do that and do this and do that, everything's gonna be fine. That's not the case, and it never will be. It's very, it's there's such a substrata of people that manage to succeed at 100%. And then now with social media and everything else and like forums quite like this, they can project that onto the world to make you think that that's almost not normal, but it's not. Of course, it's not.
What's for me then, one of the main reasons why I really wanted to get Steve on is around, obviously I know that when you put yourselves in these positions that you've been in, with Afghanistan, with military in general, and then leaving, I feel like the big elephant in the room being around PTSD, around anxiety, and just generally suffering with poor mental health after leaving, due to the fact that you are trying to discover yourself, is, I think it's such a prevalent thing. So I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts and feelings on that, because you're quite a big strong individual in the sense, you can fill up the room with your boisterousness and that. But what is really and your smile. But what underneath all of that, what has been or what has happened? Have you struggled? Are you coping?
Of course, I have, and
Yeah.
I'm struggling now. I struggle every day. I'm not going to sit here and say that I've got some magic remedy to cure that. That's not. Like, I don't want to sound too sort of like fanboyish or simpy, but like Joe Rogan nailed it. Men suffer in quiet desperation, and that hit me so hard. It resounds every day because I see it around every day. I see it in everyone's eyes that we're here with now. We all do it. I see it in everyone that I speak to. We all do it. I constantly, since I've been back from Ukraine, I constantly ask everyone, "Are you happy?" Not what you're doing, how much you're earning, like that. I always ask, like, "Are you happy? Are you happy with the choices that you're making? Are you happy with the way things are going?" And every single time, people lie, and they can't help it.
I mean, the problem with nowadays is society's build up for men is to be like machines. Be a machine, don't show emotion, crack on with the day, and it's not always the case. And there's guys out there scared to admit that they're suffering. I mean, I've seen it doing this for a couple of years now. I've seen the amount of guys that come forward and are basically on their knees because
They've left
but
it
they're
too
so
late.
scared. Yeah, and they are scared.
I feel
Yeah.
like you burn out your bravado. You know what I mean? I feel like you get a jar of bravado, right? And it's like this. Oh, you know what? As long as you're working, as long as you're, providing and all that, you're doing the right things. But also, if you're suffering in any other way, you best just whack on load of bravado and just make a joke out of it, or shrug it off, or just don't say anything at all and just hope it sort of goes
I
away.
mean,
And
I have sort of I suppose it's only anecdotal because it's for me, but like where I got hit in Ukraine by artillery, and like it bounced off my head and caused some brain damage. Now, because of that, I get like hand-eye motor functions and speech issues. But they only start to become apparent when I'm getting tired. It might even start at the end of this podcast because obviously it's a very intensive, like mental thing. And it's like your hand sort of like that is continuous until I fight it, and then I have to sort of But then towards the end of the day, and I'm just like, it starts to go again because you're fatigued because you had no respite, so to speak. And it's the same thing for the mental health aspect because
it's hidden though, isn't it?
it is and it ain't, and like. We're kind of going about it the wrong way, I think. Well, not the wrong way, but we're going in half cock because there's a lot of people doing good work by saying open up, and men should be able to open up. But then a lot of the people that are saying to these men open up are working 9 to 5. So what happens after that? So because it goes back to that original statement of quiet desperation. You know what I mean? So what we have to open up, release our feelings to all these therapists and all these like people that really with 100% of their heart want to help. But we're still we need to learn how to deal with it ourselves as well.
Well, you saying that, I mean, I've always said, mental health is a 24-hour, 7 days a week thing. It's not a 9 to 5 thing. It's happening every day of every minute of every hour, and it's not a job where it just starts at a certain time and it finishes at a certain time. People are suffering every day. People are suffering every second, and it's like I say, it's not something that's going to go away.
I think like going on again. I think we need the focus should be not self-help as in a complete and absolute thing, but like that should be the main drive because like after my time, I know we started to touch on it like in the military, and then as a civilian, I fell off the wagon. You know what I mean? I ended up being a cheating little bastard. I had no faith in me. I had no respect to anyone around me, and I was a very selfish, wronging for without having to say any more swear words. And I completely dropped off the wagon. I'm very lucky that I had people that around me that loved me at the time that tried to offer me support, but it still wasn't enough. As soon as I got anywhere to the resemblance of normality, went off it again. And it wasn't like a sort of physically sort of like you can see self-imposing destruction. It wasn't just like, oh, I'm going to get drunk and start fighting or anything. It was just like small little things that would push towards basically just me like falling off. And then like this destroyed all the relationships I had. Like now, like I struggle to have a good relationship with my children because I'm a distant father, and even when I'm there, I'm never really there anymore. Like I speak to out of my whole family, both my mum and my dad's side, I speak to maybe one relative that's an uncle, and even then, it's mostly the communication in memes.
That you putting them at arm's length.
I
You're
believe it's a bit of
controlling the
everything.
narrative.
I believe because I'm a very strong, opinionated person. But then that just because you're strong and opinionated, don't mean you're right. Not all the time.
Having them at that, I don't know if you think the same thing, Tom, and I do it as well. But if you put people at a certain arm's length, you can then, like I say, you can control the narrative of that relationship, and also the narrative around how you have where you've put them in that, or whether you use their judgment as a strength or a weakness. And I think I've done that in the past. You pull people forward and push people back, and you use them as pawns in the game of what you're doing with your mental
It's a
health.
horrible thing,
It
but
is,
it's true.
and it is, and it's not nice. But until you realise that actually you can do that, but you have to do it in a way which is sensible and obviously that's controlled. Because otherwise, what you do is you burn your bridges with people, and then when you really hit the floor, like you said, and when you see people on their knees, and they actually lost a lot of their family because they've done that, they've used up their bravado, they've burnt bridges with people, and then all of a sudden the only person they got around them is someone that they don't recognise that actually they're able to open up to, like yourself, in your group, and it's sad because you know that they've done that as a self protection mode, and all of a sudden now it's left them just with no one. It's sad. It's sad to see men
It's
like
frustrating.
that. Yeah,
It's
it is.
frustrating, but like to bring it back, sorry, like to my personal sort of situation. Obviously, I went and had to suffer through all of the stuff that I've suffered to then understand how I can fix it myself. Um, and then that sort of brings us to like just before the Ukrainian war. Um, I was in a relatively good position financially. I've just got my own little flat, my own little home. As you saw yourself, it's kitted out. It's quite a comfortable little place, like nice little bachelor pad, you know. And like I was doing
Red lights that come on certain time.
flick a switch, it's like bam.
The link is in the bio.
Send your address. But yeah, I like things were going good because I'd managed to understand what I was going through, and very stubbornly, this took a decade of like leaving the military to get into this position. Very stubbornly drawing myself out to try and get a handle on my issues that I was facing, and I finally managed to, what I would say, get myself to a level of what like a normal functioning member of society would be. And then obviously the war in Ukraine started.
So the Civil War when it started in Ukraine, was that something you put yourself
Yeah,
forward
I
for, or was
volunteered.
it something
Yeah,
you was approached with?
yeah. It was not necessarily my business up until the point that Zelensky, and this was a very defining moment in both me, my mental state, the way I view myself, and the way I view the world. When Zelensky done that conference, or that it came on the news where, and then to coincide with his speeching about how he wanted weapons, not a lift. And then it showed not long after that the bombing of the opera house in Mariupol, where it had a massive sign saying that there was children. Like all I saw in that moment was, if it's not stopped there, it's coming here in one way or another. Because it won't be long until he does, as in Putin or the Russians, do something stupid, and then Article 5 gets triggered, and then we're all at war anyway. And then I kind of, it sounds really sort of like cliche, like I'm a do-gooder or something like that. I'm not, I'm a scumbag. However, I sort of saw my children in the children in Ukraine. Like, that would kill me of being in that sort of situation and having these defenseless little people like to suffer it. And then that was it. Literally from that, it was about 8:30 at night, or so, whatever time the news was on, because I don't really watch it. I actually was in my neighbour's house and we were watching it when we see it. And then that was it. And I just knew then, I'm going.
So that for me feels like, so once again you then put yourself back in that, getting yourself ready to go again, go to war, just get yourself back in that mental state, pre-deployment as such, but your own. How did that feel different from when you was in the military? Because you're now, you're not part of a functioning military group anymore.
No one was holding my hand.
No. So what did that feel like for you?
And this was and this is where I believe I've got a lot of strength from now, is because at that defining moment, there was only one thing I needed to do, and that was get myself ready to go. And in that entailed going through a kit list. What would I need? It turns out I didn't need nothing, but I went and bought it all myself with what little money I had, and then bought a plane ticket, and then organised, because no one really knew what they were doing, but I was there within 2 weeks, stumbling away with everyone else as well. And it was refreshing in a kind of weird sense that, because I never had no officers or anyone in command telling me what to do, I was doing this myself, and it's a very righteous passage to take part on.
I personally, I mean, all of you, because going out there to Ukraine, to a foreign country, and fighting alongside them, helping them out, I have a lot of respect for people who can do that, and you say anything about the kids, I know exactly that bit you're on about, because I remember seeing it myself.
I was crying. A full-grown man, like, a man's man, as we were just talking about all that, and I was like, fuck, and I don't understand how it gripped me, but it did. And like I was going there and trying to explain it to people because obviously when you get into this country and they're looking at these foreign fighters that are turning up, they're like, "Why are you here?" Because I didn't know where Ukraine was. The only time I ever had any sort of experience of Ukraine was in the Lord of War when his brother's doing all that cocaine. He's drew a map of it. That was the only time, honestly. But before that, I didn't know. Like I could have pointed roughly where it was, but I'd have got confused
I've
with
just
Belarus
had
or
like
anything.
this real weird moment in my head where I thought, you know what? Yeah, Steve's on the ground with little blokes. He's got himself a little ground map out of the layout of the land with cocaine. Loads of
Well, that's
cocaine mountain.
right.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
that's the ex opera house, and it had like a cocaine mountain with dip in it.
right, they've
Yeah.
got 38 tanks, but I've got one rocket launcher, and I tell you what, we could do it. We could do it.
So yeah, I also felt the same thing. So in my head when you was talking about the opera house stuff, and I do remember seeing that on TV, and you know what? I think it challenges and tests, especially those that have been in and served, and just generally as well as a country that we live in, is that we do hold children to such a high esteem, and we love our kids. You know, we love our country, love our freedom. You know, maybe there's some real breaks in that at the minute.
Do
You
you know,
know,
do you know,
there's
do you know,
breaks.
do you know though, as you started that conversation, my instant mindset was that's healthy masculinity. Because all we ever hear about is how toxic it is now, how hard, like how bad it is to be like what you'd consider an old school man. Which, like to me, like men cause a lot of problems in this world, but then it's usually other men that step up to defend the ones that can't defend themselves. You know, there is a thing called toxic masculinity, and it is prevalent in our society. But then there's also the counteract to that, because when there's left, there's right. It's
Yeah, of
always,
course.
you know, when there's light, there's dark. It's
I
always
do.
going to be the way.
I feel like for a lot of people, and I know, like, you know, I haven't had a great deal of people that have come back from the Ukraine to tell their story, but the people that have inevitably gone out there, and I know that have gone and subsequently haven't always come back, is that it actually challenged their moral compass, and actually it said to them, it was a moment, and they said, "Why the fuck aren't you doing anything about this yourself?" You know, they had the mental strength to have that conversation with themselves internally to say, "What the hell are you doing about it?" So, is there anything you can do? You know, we have disasters in this country. We have all these other things that happen, and people do step up. And I do think that tests their moral compass. But when it's outside of your comfort zone, and like you said, in another country where actually people you know, they're under attack. So you then add in a new foreign individual who does want to help. You know, you're greeted maybe with open arms, maybe a little bit of a palm out in your face, and say, "Well, know your place."
It's a bit both.
Yeah, and I think that is really difficult, and I think that's why so many people were so interested in it, because it did test their moral compass, and I think that's something that, as a man, I think must have been difficult for a lot of vets. I think because a lot of veterans have spoken about going, but I also think that initial part of before you go, that training, that mental training, preparation to go is harder potentially than being there, because being there is like what you already knew. You knew
The
how to
biggest
do it.
fear you've got is in your own mind. It's the prelude to everything. It's like, you know, when you were a kid, you used to hate going to the dentist, and that fear of going was worse than actually going. And it's the same with everything. If you knew that after school, Johnny was going to go punch you up for some little misdemeanor beef that you had in school, you were dreading that until you got to the actual fight itself, and you get a
Yeah,
few knocks, and you're, oh, I'll
and
crack
you're
on.
like, that's not too bad.
Yeah.
It's not. I'll do that. I'll do that
New
again.
kink unlocked. Oh
Yeah.
no! But like, you know, boys, just it is what it is, isn't it?
No,
You know.
my thoughts then going forward is like, and my worry, especially when Maria told me you were coming back and you came back, is that my thoughts and worries were around obviously where your mental state would be, you know, especially because you went you know, you was over there just over a year, right?
14 months all
14
in.
months. So 40 months in a war zone, which is not what you would have achieved if you were in the military. You wouldn't have done that long, potentially, yeah, but most likely not. Um, what did the fallout of you being away look like mentally when you came back?
That I would say wasn't apparent until I've been back a while,
Okay.
because like there's a lot of ex-soldiers can tell you when they come back from a tour, you're still riding that high, man. Because like for all the horrible things I went through, I mean,
Mm,
this more than any drug, the adrenaline just,
yeah.
and that took a long time to sort of wear off, and then once that did, there was the fact that I had barely slept in a proper way, and I was always on edge for 14 months. That's when that came in. So then I spent most of that just drained. So I've gone from like a drastic sort of almost like a lift of being high to then like a crash and a hangover I've never truly experienced before in my life, and I probably never will again. You know, it was just like the thought of actually rolling over in bed to be more comfortable seemed so laborious that you'd just lay there and suffer and be half in, half out, and it was almost like a really, really deep embodied depression, but without the sort of being sad part, if that makes sense. You just had all the symptoms of it.
Not all the, yeah, and I think that's quite a poignant point actually. Is that you know, especially with depression, is like a lot of people think it's about the mental state that could put you in, but actually physically, and of recent, that's been more my angle, and I hate to call it an angle, but it is. You know, I
Yeah,
feel
yeah.
like depression is sort of more kicked in now than ever with me, and it's physically more taxing than it is mentally. Mentally, I just feel down. That's all I can call it. But the rest is low mood, low sex drive, low everything. Literally to the point where I'm baselining. You know, I'm nearly flatlining the way I feel, and I can see that, especially when you come back and you've used up all those stores, and now you're in a low, that your body must be like, you need to rest now, but your head is in a place where you're stimulated. You know, you're stimulated. You're under threat still. You're tired. You're mentally. Your capacity to do anything other
It's
than
almost
just breathe is hard.
the chaotic side of it, where it's all a mishmash of everything. It's like puberty, but obviously without the sort of. But you're having all these chemical imbalances, and your mind's all over the place. You obviously you have triggers and everything. Because I'm right next to an airport, and I tell you one thing: nothing sounds more scary than a plane when you're actually on its food chain. And I've never known a fear like it. And it's just, that phrase I got from a friend, but that's what something that stuck with me. When you realise you're on a plane's food chain and you start hearing planes, changes the whole thing. And then drones, and then even noise, because I'm right by a train station as well. So and there's a tunnel. So as it goes through, there's like a whoosh of air from the vacuum, and that sounds like a rocket. So like there's a thing called the milk train. So every morning from the farmers or wherever, there's a train that goes through, and every morning it sounds, because I was under the rocket attack in Yaraviv when during the first half of the war, right in the beginning of the war, and I was there. The first rocket landed 200 meters from my tent. I'd been there 3 days. I was like, I hadn't seen any form of conflict for like over a decade. I was like 4 stone heavier than what I am now. I wasn't
Yeah,
prepared. Like I didn't
yeah,
know this was coming. Like I was just like, all right, yeah, let's go. And within 2 weeks, I wasn't doing fizz. I was like, no, it's too late for that now. You just had to deal with it. And then within 4 days of being here, we're getting absolutely battered by cruise missiles, man. And then like, yeah, so it's going back like every morning, this milk train goes through, and then because of the vacuum of it,
yeah.
so R4 every morning, I'm there, it's like pinging, like I've just been injected with methamphetamine. I'm like, oh, brilliant. So I try to go back to bed on that.
What's the what's been your remedy then? What have you been doing about it?
First
If
thing I
any,
did,
if anything.
literally on my way back, as soon as I got into the UK, the first thing I did, because I ain't no boy, you know what I mean? I understand that I'm a man. I've proved that more than once on very different circumstances. I phoned a therapist here, as you know, but like for the viewers, I've phoned therapy. That was the first thing I was doing, because and in my mind I was like, I need an MOT. I need to see what's happening. But then obviously I've gone through that, started that process straight away. Um, where I got hit with the artillery before with the brain injury, so I've gone through the medical side and everything. Um, that was the first thing, and then after that, obviously, it was my kids. Now, it's to sort of talk about the mental health side of things specifically after I finished, like got back. It's quite hard because I'm running on that high, and like it's heroin addicts are the closest thing that could explain it, because that's exactly what
When
it's
I
like.
first saw you, that's what I thought. I thought
I'm
you're
still
still
flying.
buzzing,
Yeah, and I
and I
was.
and I was a little bit like, there's a crash coming
Oh,
there,
100%.
and you see it in your workplaces, and I see it within our workplace at the RBL. I've seen it in all, and then obviously it's completely different, but at the same time it's not, because you see someone and it's that masculinity thing again. It's that pot of masculinity, and actually even within females as well, whatever, is that they're buzzing, and you're like, man, I'm waiting for it now. You're hiding something else, and it's coming out, and whatever much you're going to do
Which
to
it
hide
did.
it.
Which it did, because obviously I started the therapy,
Mm.
and I went in with a very open mind. I just, I was fully understanding. I just spent 14 months in a very kinetic environment. Um, and it'd be stupid for me not to at least get some sort of professional help in one way or another. In the mind that it might come for nothing, in the mind that it might. Um, and then once that adrenaline wore off, which after a few weeks it did, but your body's still in fight or flight mode. So like the buzz is gone, but then you've got the sort of sickly feeling that used
Yeah.
to come with it. And I was doing two things. I was uncovering the emotional side of the 14 months I just had with the therapy, because that's what it's all about. It's about, how did you feel?
Mm-hmm.
When you've done this and done that and saw this and saw that, what was it like? And then you go through that. At the same time, I was transferring because I kept a diary, quite a good one as well.
Mm.
Watch out for that in a few years. But
Plug it, plug
then what? I
it.
was an idiot. But like, I'm converting that to a story because all my children are going to see is that their dad just dipped out for 14 months. Then, they couldn't really understand it. I tell them now in their own appropriate way, or, like what I can, but they're never, so this is for when they come of age and sort of maybe have a better understanding of where I was. And so I've started doing that. So now I'm reliving it all. So I'm doing two things, and this is after the adrenaline's gone. This is where I'm now on that crash. I'm going through the emotional side and recutting those scars, and then I'm reliving the memories. So they've like in my mind constantly. Um, that was really raw to begin with, and I have to admit, like I did spend a lot of time in my place, like, feeling a bit like, oh, like just sort of almost out of touch with myself,
Yeah.
And I won't say it's from a position of weakness or anything like that, but it was just the surreality of everything that's just happened. Because I lived a very very colourful year. To be, to skirt around a lot of it, it was like a lot happened. And industrialized war as we've done it is not designed for you. Like we're not designed to see that. Like it's barbaric in a way that it's very hard to fathom, and that takes a long time to catch up. And it still hasn't caught up completely. I mean, to sit there and say that I'm fine, it's a complete understatement. You can't be fine from stuff like that. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm lucky in the sense that I'm from a position of comfort
Mm.
because I'm here now. I'm here with you boys. You know what I mean? Sitting here. My biggest gripe about today is that I might have to eat dinner a bit later. Oh no! So I'm going back to my massive beanbag and projector TV and all my home comforts and having my nice beautiful meal in the heat, in the warmth, a bit later than usual. There's people out there that have been there from the beginning because they're stuck there because it's their country they're fighting for. So like I try and hold myself to a sort of like a position of fortune that I've had the choice because I willingly went to that war voluntarily. I went forth. I went strong arm. This is my me making that choice.